welcome to the Morning Watch on Love 101 FM. I'm your host, Stokely Marshall. A special welcome to our listeners on love101.org. And if you are overseas and on the move, US listeners can access us at 712-832-8001. And if you are in the UK, 0330-332-6541, or join us via the Love 101 FM app that can be downloaded from the Google Play Store or the Apple Store. You can also join us on Love 101 FM, Facebook, and YouTube Live. In the main and second watches, the issue of child labor in Jamaica. For our Facebook question, we ask, what in your mind is considered child labor? Share your responses on our Love 101 FM Facebook page and YouTube Live, and also on WhatsApp 876-997-3125 with your text and voice notes using hashtag The Morning Watch. We'll share your comments later on in the program, but first, here's I quote.
This morning's I quote: "Success is the sum of small efforts repeated day in and day out." Robert Collier.
Yes. An accumulation of events, an accumulation of efforts, small efforts repeated day in and day out. The main watch. We'll be back after this break.
Recession, bills, disappointment, divorce, misbehaving children, and the list goes on. How can we cope when we're faced with so many issues? They seem to fall one behind the other. Well, it's good to talk. And Love 101 is making the way with counseling psychologist Joan Pinkney. Yes, Love 101 invites you to talk, share, seek guidance and prayer with the counselor. Simply call the Love 101 studio lines at 968-8327, 968-8328, and 954-376-5418 for the counselor. Join Joan Pinkney every Tuesday and Wednesday, 10 p.m. to 11 p.m. for the counselor, live on Love 101, the family station. Help is on the way. It's all about you.
PSOJ's Crime Stop Jamaica Unsolved. We need your help to solve the murder of Courtney Stud Sutherland, a 49-year-old film production professional. Courtney was shot to death in his car at the corner of Washington Boulevard and Headley Avenue, Kingston 20 at 9:10 a.m. on Tuesday, March 16, 2021, in what appears to be an act of road rage. Crime Stop is offering a total reward of $200,000 for information leading to the arrest and charge of those responsible. If you know something, say something. Call Crime Stop Jamaica 311. Solving crime pays.
Welcome back to the Morning Watch. I am Stokely Marshall, now backed by a unanimously adopted resolution at the United Nations General Assembly. 2021 has been declared the International Year of the Elimination of Child Labor. Here are some facts as stated by endchildlabor2021.org. Between 2000 and 2016, there was a 38% decrease in child labor globally. Almost 100 million children have been removed from child labor over the past 20 years, but 152 million children across the world are still in child labor. The challenge is concentrated in agriculture, services, and other industries. But what about the issue of child labor in Jamaica? With us to look at this plus more, we have Diane Gordon Harrison, Children's Advocate in the Office of the Children's Advocate, and of course, she's also an attorney at law. We also have with us Sasha Dare Gordon, Director of Child Labor, Ministry of Labor and Social Security. Gordon Harrison, Sasha Dare Gordon, good day, good morning. How are you both?
Good morning, Mr. Marshall. Good morning, Sasha. I'm well. Hope you both are as well. Good morning, Mr. Marshall. Good morning, Diane. Good morning to your listeners. I'm well, thanks.
Great having you both. Now, first of all, I'm going to start with you, Mrs. Gordon Harrison. This is an issue which has been coming up from time to time here in Jamaica, including most recently. First of all, to help the listeners and just so that we can have a clear understanding, what exactly are we talking about when we say child labor? What is child labor?
All right, so essentially, the short definition is that child labor involves any work that can be classified as hazardous or something that takes away from the ability of the child to be a child. So, for example, if the child has to be missing school, thereby impacting the child's right to access and education, because he or she has to earn a living, then that is child labor. If the child, for example, is not given enough time for leisure and play and recreation because they have to be working, that is in fact child labor. And one of the telling tales really is that the conditions of work are in fact inappropriate and expose the child to some kind of vulnerability, whether it is because there are toxic chemicals involved or hazardous machinery. And then in Jamaica as well, our legislation says that there should be no child who is working below the age of 13 years at all. There are some exceptions, of course, and I'm sure we'll get into that for like artistic performances and so on. But just very briefly, that's the short definition.
Understood. Sasha Dear Gordon, any comment?
No, okay. It's just to add that Diane really touched on child labor, but I wanted to take it a bit, take it back to the rights of the child when we signed the United Nations Conventions of the Rights of the Child in 1991. And also, she mentioned the Act, the Child Care and Protection Act. Those are, and the conventions, the ILO conventions, the worst forms of child labor, which is Convention 182. Those are really the framework that we use in defining and also in terms of the programs and the systems that we put in place to eliminate child labor.
Something I want to look at quickly, Mrs. Gordon Harrison, you mentioned in defining child labor, you are very clear in indicating that it is certain activities that would take away from a child being a child. We generally speaking know know who a child is, but when you say take away from a child being a child, you mentioned going to school, etc. Can you develop on that a little bit more? Because for a child to be a child, it can mean different things to different children. You want to say something a little bit more about that?
All right, certainly. I'd like to ground the response right where Sasha took us, which is the Convention on the Rights of the Child. So, first of all, that convention defines anyone between below 18 years as being a child. And with that status of being a child, there are certain entrenched rights as established under the various articles of the Convention on the Rights of the Child. So it speaks, for example, to the child's right to have an education, which means not just be registered in school, but having that active access. So attending school regularly, participating fully in teaching and learning experiences and in co-curricular activities. So if a child, for example, is on the road hustling or in a business place working, or because it's market day, every Friday the child is absent from school, that impinges on the child's right to an education, which comes by virtue of the status of being a child. So that would take away from the child being a child, then, so to speak. The convention as well speaks about the right of the child to recreation, leisure, and play. If you're working, 7 days a week, let's say you're even going to school, so the access to education part is covered. But as soon as school is finished, you have to work from 2 o'clock until 9 in the nights. When does that child get time to relax? When does that child get time for recreation? So that is impinging on the child's ability to be a child and to enjoy that phase of life. So anything that negatively impacts on the child's access to these various rights, as articulated under the convention, would be seen as something that interferes with the child's ability to fully express and enjoy childhood.
Understood. Professor Dear Gordon, can you comment on 2021 being the International Year for the Elimination of child labor, bearing in mind that there is the goal that by 2025 there really ought not to be any more child labor taking place globally. Any comments on that?
Sure. Well, this discussion started around 2018, 2019 between the International Labour Organization and the Alliance 8.7 Global Partnership. Now, the Alliance 8.7 Global Partnership speaks to the Sustainable Development Goal of Target 8.7 to eliminate child labor in all its forms by 2025. Now, the last global estimates was published in 2016. The 152 million you make reference to earlier, that's where it was taken from. Now, we are now approaching another period where the global estimates will be published, and that is this year. The estimates they'll be having a meeting in the week of World Day Against Child Labor during that week. And what it surrounds is that we want to know in 2016 where we were at, which is 152 million. Now, over the 4-year period, a lot of initiatives were undertaken from the various countries. And so at this point, it would be best to know where we are at in terms of the progress that we have made. However, we have to bear in mind that with the pandemic that we're currently facing, that also has posed some sort of threat to the increases that were made over that particular period. So we're now waiting with bated breath to hear exactly what those figures will be come the second week in June. So all of this,
with 2021 being the International Year for the Elimination of Child Labor, does that, in terms of your office and as children's advocate, any special focus in terms of your own activities in that sphere? Any thoughts on that?
Definitely. I'll go first, Dan.
Okay.
Dan is a member of our National Steering Committee on Child Labor. So for this year, we started already in terms of Jamaica's intervention. Earlier in February, I think it was 11, our own Minister, Honorable Carter Muda, he participated in the virtual launch, the high-level virtual launch, where he made the commitment that Jamaica will accelerate its efforts to eliminate child labor, and we will be doing some more targeted actions this year. After that, we have been having subsequent trainings though, in terms of preparing our inspectorates or labor inspectors to widen the scope in terms of when they go out there to be able to identify child labor. So it's not really focused on their specialized area, but get them to accept, to able to identify child labor. So those are some of the things that we have done so far. What we have planned, we are having a Jamaica launch of the International Year for the Elimination of Child Labor, and that will be in the week of, the second week in June. World Day Against Child Labor is celebrated on June 12th every year, and that effort seeks to put, it brings together all the various groups so that they tighten the collaboration in order to we look at the plight of children in our respective countries and the measures that we put in place. So that week we'll be having the Jamaica launch. Of course, on the 12th, there will be a message in the print media from our Honorable Carter Muda. Separate and apart from that though, we are looking at having an online poster competition. Last year we had an essay competition, and it was supported by the children. We looked at the impact of COVID and child labor. This year we're looking at an online poster competition. Given our limitations.
I'm sorry, Mr. Gordon, as well as Mrs. Gordon Harrison, I'm going to ask both of you to pause for a moment. We're going to head to a break. The Morning Watch will be right back.
Okay.
Jamaica Banana Board, Green Gold, Life Health, and the Environment. The time brought to you by the Jamaica Banana Board is
7:15 on the family station, Love 101.
We will. Two words that show our unwavering determination and dictate our actions. Because at Digicel, we value you like family. So here are our 5 promises to you. We will provide you with the very best LTE and broadband experience. We will be by your side 24/7, responding to your queries within seconds. We will be transparent. None of them hidden charges or tricky terms and conditions, Tindy. We will bring digital experiences you can love with great apps, entertaining content, and affordable data bundles. We will listen to your feedback and reward your loyalty. We will and we must, because together we are so much better. Digicel, better together.
Nation, baby.
Rain or shine, any weather. When we go bold, we go virgin. Quality paint, no faded colors. When we go bold, we go virgin. Let your imagination run free. Pick a color, any color for the space where you need. When we say it bold, that mean it not peel. Quality in every color, 7-year guarantee. When we go bold, we go virgin. Watch your color. When we go bold, we go virgin. Rain or shine, any color you need. When we go bold, we go virgin.
You are the buzz, 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 buzz. You are the zing, 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 zing. You are the You are the click, 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 click. You are the pop, pop, pop. You are the I in Jamaica. So keep fizzing for the love of it. Pepsi.
Become the hero on the scene by taking the COVID vaccine. Get vaccinated as soon as you get all the facts. Don't listen to the rumors. This vaccine might just make it possible for teachers to sit face to face with schoolers. This vaccine make it safer for everybody, from the young to the elderly. Don't you want to go back to living normally when things were more orderly? And if you want to live a long good life, then we all have to do what's right. So let's get vaccinated along with the heroes on the front line.
A message from the Ministry of Health and Wellness. There are a million reasons to want to own a home.
I want more space for the children.
I am tired of paying rent.
My wife and I want an investment.
Go from future plans to keys in hand with an NCB mortgage. Get rates as low as 6.95%, 100% financing, and up to 40 years to repay. Plus, get the life insurance and home insurance you need all in one place. Visit myhome.jncb.com to get started. Conditions apply.
Welcome back to Morning Watch. I'm your host, Stokely Marshall. In the main and second watches today, the issue of child labor in Jamaica is our topic. And our guests for both watches, we have Dan Gordon Harrison, Children's Advocate and of the Office of the Children's Advocate, and Sasha Dear Gordon, Director of Child Labor in the Ministry of Labor and Social Security. Now, just prior to the break, Ms. Dear Gordon, you were outlining a number of very critical matters. Would you like to just continue that thought before we move on?
Sure, thank you, Stokely. I was referring to the online poster competition that we'll have, that will include children, where they're able to express themselves through art while at the same time making it fun for them. So that we're looking at to take place over the summer period. Now, in terms of a more targeted approach.
I just thought I'd quickly ask. You said this is an online
poster competition.
Online poster competition, okay.
Right.
And I suppose this is because of what the country is dealing with now in terms
exactly, because of the restrictions. We thought it's best we do an online poster competition. And so we'll be getting the support from the Institute of Jamaica to assist us with that.
Okay.
I was mentioning the more targeted approach that we'll be taking this year, and it is the implementation of a child labor risk identification model. Now, the risk identification model is really a tool that was developed by the ILO and the Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean, And what that tool seeks to do is to give us the avenues to take up, well, let us to take a proactive approach in terms of child labor. So we use existing data. So we have a Jamaica Youth Activity Survey that was conducted in 2016. We also have the census survey that was done. I think the last one was in 2011. So the input, the microdata from those will be plugged into the model, and it will generate some vulnerability maps. Now, we are well advanced in that process. We have developed the maps by county, but in order for us to provide any meaningful solutions to the children and their families, we are now working to get it at a constituency level. We are hoping as well that this will be ready by June, July, so we can actually commence the implementation about August, September.
Yes, and what well, you sort of said it already, but just for clarity, what exactly will the implementation of all of this cause, or what are you hoping it will lead to?
Okay, if it is that we know exactly, because what the model tends to do is to identify those areas, those communities, those constituencies that are more vulnerable to child labor. Now, if we can identify where child labor will occur, it will also identify the sector that child labor may occur in. If it is that we have this information, we can put systems in place to interrupt that trajectory. And so we are looking at the preventative method as opposed to reacting to child labor.
So by drilling down to constituency, is it something that you're expecting the members of parliament to tackle as well?
Most definitely. And if you heard our minister yesterday in parliament, he also made reference, and this is something that he has been saying since he got to the ministry, that in terms of the programs and the assistance that we will get in terms of pushing the ministry's programs forward will also include the members of parliament, because they're the ones who are actually on the ground, and we'll be able to get more support from the persons involved.
Interesting indeed, Mrs. Gordon Harris. Yeah, in terms of the role your office will be playing in terms of the International Year for the Elimination of Child Labor, we did hear quite a bit of that a moment ago. But what I'd like you to help us with, Mr. Gordon Harrison, because oftentimes we talk about these concepts and they sound esoteric and a little bit, the way that they're framed sometimes, many people may not necessarily appreciate exactly what you mean. But what exactly causes child labor? Because isn't that the crux of the matter? What leads to people having to go out there as small children to work? How can that sort of connection between the cause and having to do child labor be broken? What causes child labor, Mr. Gordon Harris?
All right. So I think it's a combination of different factors. So first of all, there is the lack of understanding, I think, among some sectors of our society still, which don't see child labor as an issue that needs to be dealt with. So sometimes there are misconceptions, if you were, about what is, teaching a child responsibility in terms of, learning the good tenets of hard work and honest pay and so on. And, when that borders into being too much, so that it's interfering with the child's childhood and exposing the child to very inappropriate, toxic and hazardous situations. So that's one issue. The other issue as well, it goes back to economics. Some families are just not able to make ends meet. And so when the children get to a certain age that they consider a sufficient age to assist with, bringing food into the household and putting, money into the family's coffers, children have to join the workforce as far as they see it as a way out of poverty or as a way of supplementing the family income. So for me, those are the two big ticket items that continue to make child labor an issue that we have to deal with, both at the symptomatic level and also looking at the root and how we can assist, which is why I think certainly within the context of the Jamaican environment, The Child Labor Unit is actually based in the Ministry of Labor and Social Security. So we're looking at the social support that families who perhaps are exposed would need to assist them to bridge the gap, So I think that this is perhaps one of the philosophical reasons for placing the Child Labor Unit within that ministry that also deals with social protection.
Indeed. Now, one of the, well, I'll just ask you directly, is trying to eliminate child labor really a break from tradition? This is for you, Mrs. Gordon Harrison. Is it really an attempt to break from tradition where children would work, for example, in a family business, to learn from an early age about the work?
No. In fact,
work, and to one day operate and own this business. And a lot of children, you will see them in some of the supermarkets. You will hear that this is the son or the daughter of the owner.
Yes.
And they are working after school.
Right. Well, as long as those work hours do not extend for too long, as long as those work hours are not coinciding with when they should be attending school or even after school when they should be doing homework and resting, and as long as those work hours do not expose the children to any inappropriate situations, for example, working around a forklift or dealing with, chemicals that could be toxic or poisonous, or anything that would be inappropriate for a child of a certain age to navigate. So what we're saying is that, of course, there is good benefit to teaching your children responsibility. Of course, you will have parents who own businesses and other endeavors who want to expose their children to what it is they do, how they do it. But as with all things, there are appropriate ways through which to teach these lessons. So what we're saying is, yes, teach responsibility, but at the same time, be sure not to offend what ought to be properly age-appropriate activity for a child of that particular age.
I see. So you're not saying that the child cannot do some maybe light work?
Absolutely. In fact, the legislation speaks to that, as do the policies that come out of the Child Labor Unit. I mean, the legislation uses words such as a child can do light work, but not hazardous work. The child can work at reasonable hours, but not for very long hours at a time, or night work, if you will. Or working in very largely industrialized environments and so on. So the legislation does in fact recognize this. And one of the key targets, I think, which very proudly the National Steering Committee on Child Labor has achieved, is that we have finalized, for instance, what light work is. So we have defined that and created a list of different activities that would be appropriate for children to engage in. So the legislation and the policies are practical in their formulation.
Indeed. Any comments before we head to our 7:30 break, Sasha Dare Gordon?
Yes, totally. Just want to add to what Diane mentioned in terms of the child labor. There is child labor which is illegal, and there is child work. Diane also gave examples of child work in terms of the light work list. So I just wanted to make that distinction. I know from time to time persons have used child labor, child work interchangeably, but they are not. So I just wanted to make that clear.
Okay, we'll continue this discussion in the second watch after we look at the newspapers and the headlines in those newspapers, and check out your answers to the social media question, which is, what in your mind is considered child labor? Mrs. Gordon Harrison and Ms. Dare Gordon, I'm going to ask you to stay with us. Well, you will be staying with us into the second segment. The Morning Watch will be right back after this break.
One-on-One, the Caribbean's leader in personalized online learning education, brings you OneX. OneX brings the classroom to you. Join our live online classes daily, including CSEC and CAPE workshops. Need more focus in particular subjects? OneX allows you to access our one-on-one live online tutoring. Allow your child the self-paced learning they need. With over 10 years of CSEC and CAPE past paper questions and solutions. Visit onex.co and sign up today. OneX, because learning is personal.
JN Bank Live Online Banking is your quick and easy banking that's safe and secure. Sign up today. Visit jnbank.com. JN Bank will help you find a way. The time is
7:30 on The Sound of Love.
You are the buzz, 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 buzz. You are the zing, 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 zing. You are the you are the click, 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 click. You are the pop, pop, pop. You are the I in Jamaica. So keep fizzing for the love of it. Pepsi.
Flow is connecting Jamaica to fiber fast internet. Over 250 communities island-wide have received upgrades since last year, with many more to come. Flow is committed to giving more Jamaicans better internet access. And with over $40 billion invested, our network grows stronger each day. Visit a Flow store today or call 1-800-804-2994 to find out if you can upgrade to the fiber fast experience on Jamaica's largest network.
Welcome back to the Morning Watch. I'm your host, Stokely Marshall. Let's take a look at the newspapers to see what Jamaicans and others are saying and doing. And we have here in the Gleaner, former senior cop Renato Adams in hospital. Former senior cop Renato Adams in hospital. And turning to the Jamaica Observer, we have here with reference to the Police Federation. Federation says proposed 2.5% wage increase causing unease. And that story by Alicia Dunkley Willis, senior staff reporter at the Jamaica Observer. Coming up next, we'll read for you some of the feedback from our WhatsApp question, which is, what in your mind is considered child labor? If you haven't done so yet, leave a comment or share your responses on our Love 101 FM Facebook page and YouTube Live, and also on WhatsApp 876-997-3125 with your text and voice notes, using the hashtag The Morning Watch. We'll be right back.
I am a man, yes. Strong man, integrity man, I am a man.
It's the final Wednesday inside April. And you know what the man them do on the last Wednesday? It's Integrity Wednesday inside the mailbox. Tune in this Wednesday, April 28th, with host Kevin Bailey at 5:30 p.m. inside the mailbox with our Integrity guest, music producer, Justice of the Peace, and husband to Carleen Davis, Thomas Cohen, better known as Tommy Cohen. Be sure to tune in at 5:30 p.m. to hear about the importance of having values and character in his family, marriage, and to add to his music. He will also share with us about his experience of his not one, not two, but 4 recent surgeries. It's all things integrity with Tommy Cohen this Wednesday inside the program Designed for Men, hosted by men and with guests who are men. It happens this and every Wednesday with yours truly, Courtney Morrison and Kevin Bailey here on Love 101, the family station. Monday.
Here is a reminder from Love 101, the family station, as we face the COVID-19 pandemic. Masks are effective only when used in combination with frequent hand cleaning with soap and water or alcohol-based solutions. Wear a mask that is lined with 2 or more layers. When taking it off, ensure you dispose of it properly. I'm Nigel Wilkinson from Love 101, reminding you to protect yourself while protecting others. Stay safe and keep it locked on Love 101, the family station.
Welcome back to the Morning Watch. I'm your host, Stokely Marshall. We're going to continue our discussion on the issue of child labor in Jamaica. Our guests are Diane Gordon Harrison, Children's Advocate, Office of Children's Advocate, and Sasha Dare Gordon, Director of Child Labor, Ministry of Labor and Social Security. Now, this matter of child labor is clearly not one that's going to go away overnight. Mrs. Gordon Harrison, earlier on when you were speaking, you indicated that there are exceptions, of course, like in many things. There are exceptions in relation to the kind of work a child can do. Just prior to the break, you did mention light work, but even apart from that, there are some non-light work that children are allowed to do. For example, in the theatrical sphere, etc.
Yes.
Would you like to develop on that, please, so persons can have a clearer understanding as to what exactly you meant?
All right. So basically, the law makes an exception that says that if it is that a child is involved in the visual arts, whether it is acting, singing, playing a musical instrument, dancing, anything that qualifies as entertainment within those confines, then it is perfectly permissible. So, for example, that's why you'll find very young children taking part in ballet recitals or in theatrical productions, for example, at the Philip Sherlock Center. Those things are properly considered as exceptions under the law. And in fact, that's not unique to the Jamaican context, but globally, it's not recognized or designated as being exploitative or, in fact, considered as child work or child labor, sorry.
Interesting, because suppose a child, for example, is a child of an entertainer, and that child is brought on stage by their father or their mother. And this is a stage show at which adults are the patrons.
Yes.
And that child remains on stage for a whole solid hour performing with their mother or their father. Or they might be on stage alone. It might not even be the child of an entertainer, but it's a small child performing on stage
Right.
to an adult audience.
Yes, that's where other considerations would come into play. So, for example, in another section of the Child Care and Protection Act, it determines or defines, if you will, what circumstances are considered inappropriate for a child, and would therefore mean that the child, if found in those circumstances, would be one who is prima facie in need of care and protection. So, for example, we speak about a stage show, and then we'd have to consider culturally what happens at a stage show. Are we going to be having persons smoking, whether it is tobacco products or marijuana or some other product? Are we going to be having persons, blazing up the lighter when the selector hits something that is, railing up the crowd? Are we going to be having open consumption and distribution of alcohol in those contexts? And if we truthfully assess what happens at our stage shows, then we would see that these other countervailing factors would perhaps say that a child ought properly not even to be in attendance, let alone on stage, doing a head-top dance or something along that line. So those other circumstances would dictate whether a child should be there in the first place. And if a child shouldn't be there in the first place because of the other circumstances and the context, then I think we don't even need to consider, would the child be being on stage for over an hour dancing and gyrating? And that's also a part of it. What kind of dancing is the child doing? Is it provocative? Is it sexually suggestive? Is it adult moves? We have certainly seen videos, for example, that have gone viral with children doing very provocative moves and dressed very scantily and performing to a cheering adult audience. And certainly when you look at the inappropriateness of that in terms of the age of the child, yes, it's a part of our culture, but there's always age-appropriate behavior, that goes into the determining factors.
Indeed. Sasha Dare Gordon, any thoughts? Miss Dare Gordon, I hope we haven't lost her. Sasha Dare Gordon?
Oh, I'm sorry. No, Stokely.
Okay. You confer with Mrs. Gordon.
Yes, I'm in agreement with Diane.
I'm gonna. I wanna. Okay. Let's another scenario. Taking into consideration all of what Mrs. Gordon Harrison just said, the child is 17 and a half, performing at the same stage show. Any thoughts, Miss Dear Gordon?
The same rule will apply because the child, well, it's still a child.
Whether male or female.
It's still a child.
Bearing in mind the definition of a child.
Say that again for me, Stokely.
I ask because, people will sometimes play with the law, so to speak, or they try to stretch it.
No, the law is the law, and it speaks to children. A child is a person up until they get to age 18. So the rules that apply that Diane mentioned earlier, they would also.
Well, any technological issues, we're trying to resolve them as we go along. As we speak, Mrs. Gordon Harrison.
Sorry, I wasn't hearing you as well, Stokely, because I think Sasha was responding to a question you had asked her, so you didn't come through very clearly. Could you repeat for me, please?
Oh, I'm so sorry. I thought, okay. A scenario that I painted, taking into account all of what you just said about the stage show,
yes.
But the child is 17 and a half years old.
Right. Oh, that's of no moment. A child is anyone under 18 years.
Exactly.
So the same rules would apply.
The same rules apply, okay.
Whether male or female.
Okay, fine. Okay, thought I'd ask that one. Well, in terms of the focus, when we speak about child labor in Jamaica, based on the coverage we often see in the media and the comments being made by persons generally, persons will get the impression that you're speaking a lot about the children who are seen wiping car glasses at traffic lights. Is there a focus in that area for some reason, and if so, why? Miss Dear Gordon?
I'm glad you asked that question, Stokely, because persons tend to look at child labor is just what it is that you see out there, children at the stoplights begging, wiping the glass. But we need to bear in mind that child labor also takes place at home. What I mean by that is Mrs. Gordon Harrison mentioned earlier in terms of preventing a child from getting an education, preventing a child from leisure. At home, if it is that you have a child who is prevented from going to school in order to do chores, or the amount of time it takes for that child to be doing chores at home, so it prevents the child from going to school, prevent the child from playing, that is child labor. And I just want to make that point clear, because a lot of persons are of the impression that child labor doesn't take place at home.
An older child has to stay home with a younger child so the parent can go to work. You're saying that when that older child stays home to babysit the younger child, that older child is engaged in child labor?
Is it that the child is prevented from going to school to stay home to take care of the child?
And that's a result cannot go to school on that day.
Well, that would not be acceptable, because you are breaking one of the rights of a child, which is the right to education.
Interesting. And Mrs. Gordon Harrison, earlier you mentioned the whole matter of going to, for example, a market day during the week with a parent who sells in the market. Many of these parents will say it's essential that this child accompanies them to the market on that market day.
Yes, absolutely.
They are saying that is child labor, though.
Yes, it is, because if a child routinely, when you look at that child's school attendance, you see that the child is missing every Friday. Calculate how many contact hours that child would have missed from classes. And if a child is routinely missing classes, this is impacting negatively on their ability to achieve certain targets in terms of their educational goals. So right away,
And I'm going to ask you to hold that thought. Sasha Dear Gordon, stay with us. Listeners, we'll be right back after this break on the Morning Watch.
Tropical race 4 disease, TR4, is a soil-borne disease that has the potential to wipe out the Jamaican banana and plantain crops. Farmers and visitors must disinfect shoes and tools before entering farms daily. If your banana or plantain crops seem to be wilting, call the Banana Board at 876-922-5490 or 876-922-4327. Jamaica Banana Board, Green Gold, Life Health and the Environment.
The time by the Ministry of Health and Wellness, Healthy People, Healthy Environment is
7:46.
Bills to pay and funds to transfer? No problem. I do it all on my time with JN Bank Live Online Banking. It's my simple and secure as that online banking.
Phone credit need a top up? No problem. I do it with JN Bank Live Online Banking.
It's quick and easy with just a few clicks. JN Bank Live, online banking that goes where you go. Sign up today. Visit jnbank.com. JN Bank, we'll help you find a way.
Bear with each other and forgive as the Lord forgave you. So says Colossians 3:13. Try showing love to one another. See how much better that feels? Let's work together to make Jamaica a gentler, kinder society. A message from the Church of the Open Bible, 12 Washington Boulevard. Join in our worship service Sundays at 8 a.m. right here on Love 101.
Nation, baby.
Rain or shine, any weather. When we go bold, we go virgin. Quality paint, no faded colors. When we go bold, we go virgin. Let your imagination run free. Pick a color, any color for the space what you need. When we say it bold, that mean it not peel. Quality in every color, 7-year guarantee. When we go bold, we go virgin. Watch it color. When we go bold, we go virgin. Rain or shine, any color you need. When we go bold, we go virgin.
Flow is connecting Jamaica to fiber-fast internet. Over 250 communities island-wide have received upgrades since last year, with many more to come. Flow is committed to giving more Jamaicans better internet access. And with over $40 billion invested, our network grows stronger each day. Visit a Flow store today or call 1-800-804-2994 to find out if you can upgrade to the fiber-fast experience on Jamaica's largest network.
Welcome back to the Morning Watch. I'm your host, Stokely Marshall. We continue to look at the issue of child labor in Jamaica, and our guests are Diane Gordon Harrison, Children's Advocate of the Office of the Children's Advocate, and Sasha Dear Gordon, Director of Child Labor, Ministry of Labor and Social Security. Just before the break a few moments ago, Mrs. Gordon Harrison, you were making a point, the whole matter of the market day, and if they are going to be missing school, for example, on a Friday, and the amount of contact hours they would have missed.
Yes.
When those hours accumulate. Please continue, Mrs. Gordon Harrison.
Yes, I was just to take it to its logical conclusion then. So if you're missing so many contact hours and you're missing, what may be valuable lessons, perhaps tests, some schools have a little weekly test on a Friday and so on. It means you're negatively impacting on that child's transcript and that child's ability to grasp certain concepts or to have them reinforced, which of course is going to put the child at a developmental disadvantage because the education would have been so impaired that the child now has a problem matriculating at a satisfactory level when exit exams and so on come around. The other thing as well is that depending on the type of exposure, the child could be seeing all sorts of inappropriate things. People could be catching up in quarrels. You could be having a fight with somebody pulling a knife and so on. And what we need to realize is that children are social creatures, as are all of us as human beings, and they model behavior. So you as a parent may be doing all you can to give your child that grounding, so you have your rules in your house and so on. But when you have the child in the marketplace, for example, from 6 o'clock in the morning until 8 in the evening, that means you now have the child exposed to all sorts of conditions that you may not have a direct control over to shield the child from that. So it really is something that I think goes back again to some cultural practices that require us to think in a different way. Because not because we've always done it that way means that it's right or means that it's the best kind of formulation for exposing children.
Sasha, dear Gordon, any thoughts? Because
Yes, I just want
you
to.
need this child to help you with the market on a Friday, and you're now telling me that the child cannot accompany can't accompany the parent to the market. That might be a challenge for the parent.
Totally, we have to be careful, and we have to be mindful of the systems that are in place. No, I know persons tend to look at it to say, well, okay, they're assisting their families. But when you look at the whole environment that Mrs. Gordon Harris mentioned earlier, I mean, it's really not conducive for a child. Now, on Monday, I think there was an article in the Gleaner on Monday. Minister of State in the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information, Robert Morgan, sorry. He mentioned in that article that there are stricter measures that are coming for parents, and that is based on a study that was done. It has not yet been released, but that's a study that was done speaking to children on the street, living on the streets, children who are on the streets, and it speaks to these things and the position of vulnerability that it puts these children in. You're talking about trafficking as well. Yes, a child is there with the parent in the market, but then if you say, okay, go and give this to somebody, the child can easily be snatched. So it's more than just, yes, they're with the parent. We have to bear in mind that these are children, and we have to put them in environments that are safe and healthy for them.
So much that can be developed on that, but of course, more and none, and never enough time for well, maybe we need to have a part 2 as well, even though we have been here for some time discussing this. You just open up an area. For example, what would happen to these children? Well, let me ask you directly. Is it that the government is proposing that if the child is in an unsafe situation with the parent, that the government would take the child away from the parent? Is that where it's headed?
Based on the article, yes, because it mentions stricter measures. And in the article, it also make reference to children who have been removed from the streets by the CPFSA, and when they actually attend the court, the parents come and they said, basically they did not know all the excuses. But little from then, you also go back, you see that same child on the street. So they're looking at implementing stricter measures. If it is that the parents are not taking care of the children or they ought to, it could be that the child can be removed from the homes.
And placed where?
Sorry?
Taken from the parent and placed where?
Well, you have the state care.
And
you have state care, you have other family members.
That's true,
Say that again, Stokely, I didn't hear you.
Many persons have concerns about the quality of the state care.
Yeah, that's for another discussion, Stokely.
Absolutely.
That is why I said maybe a part 2 might be required. Much more and none. I want to jump quickly now into what would a world look like without child labor. Let us imagine we're now in 2025 and you have achieved the goal of eliminating child labor. What does that look like? What is the picture you're painting for the public to work towards? Sasha, dear Gordon?
Okay, well, in a nutshell, it's really will be a better Jamaica in the end. That's the intended result. Because if it is that you have children who are actually going to school, all children are in school, Stokely and Diane. All children are getting the opportunity to be children. it will prove that you will get the best out of them. Now, if it is that you get the best out of our children, the future, the future for Jamaica is bright. The poverty that we're talking about now, it is a way out of poverty. Education. Diane alluded to it earlier. Children live what they learn. If it is that these children are allowed to go to school, get an education, get a job, being able to provide for their families, that is what they will teach their children. And so that is the cycle that we want to be creating, not what currently exists, where you have parents who worked as a child, now they're forcing their children to work. That is the cycle that we need to break.
We have a bit of a time constraint on our hands, but well, thank you for that, Mrs. Dear Gordon. I wanted a comment from you, Mrs. Gordon Harrison, but I want to get this Facebook question in. It's from Facebook. If I'm reading the question verbatim, if a child is not given the right to work, minimal at least, why is consent given to them for certain activity? Full stop. That is age 16, full stop. Note well, I do believe a child is a child for much longer than 18 on my agenda because I'm still responsible for them, full stop. Please explain. I'm going to throw that one to you, Mrs. Gordon Harrison.
I knew you would, but that's quite all right because these are some very practical questions that I too have. Because in my book, a child is anyone under 18 years. And so if it is that they are considered mature enough for certain things at a particular age, then it injects some amount of confusion in the discussion. I've had, for example, mothers and fathers who are tearing their hair out because at age 16 and a half, when their child is in fourth form, they're actively having sexual relations. And the parents can see the problems coming from a mile away. Grades are falling, lack of interest in extracurricular activities. Sometimes it's with an older partner. So you find the power dynamic is shifting. It may be an abusive relationship. And they come to me and go to the police for help. And we can't do anything because legally there is no option under the law. You can't have that person arrested because the age of consent is 16. And the teenager, though under your roof, though falling off in other areas, is happily, in a relationship.
And even though you're the one paying for the education.
Exactly, and the food, and giving them the shelter, and all of these things. So it does create an anomaly, which continues, I think, and will continue to be a very active debate for years to come.
Mrs. Sasha Dear Gordon?
Well, Diane dealt with the part of it that speaks to the 16, but I want to look at the part that speaks to a child being able to work. Yes, a child can work at age 16. The Child Care and Protection Act states that for formal employment for a child, it can be age 15 if that child has completed grade 11 in the secondary school. So you can have a child at age 16 who is legal and able to work. However, that child can only work in some hazardous situations. So you can have the child working 40 hours for the week. So if, say for example, you have a child who completes grade 11, wants to work in an office as a clerical officer, that's accepted. The child can work for 40 hours. The light work comes into play between the ages of 13 to 15.
Okay. Understood. Any final thoughts from both of you ladies, starting with you, Mrs. Gordon Harrison, then Sasha Dear Gordon in a second or two. Mrs. Gordon Harrison.
Right. So just to say that this year being the very significant international year for the elimination of child labor, Jamaica stands ready, as Sasha has said, to be a part of that global push. We have good initiatives in place, and I can only anticipate and look forward to greater achievements as we go forward.
Have to leave it there, Mrs. Dear Gordon.
Okay, I look at it on another perspective. It's an appeal really to our parents, caregivers. Children are really a blessing from God, and so I want to take this opportunity to urge our parents and our guardians to, nurture, love, guide, protect our children, because how it is that we treat our children today, that dictates the future that Jamaica will have. And so I want to leave with Proverbs 22, verse 6. Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he's old, he will not depart from it.
A very lovely ending. I have to leave it there. Thank you all for being with us. This is Gordon Harrison and Mrs. Dear Gordon. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your
Thank you for having us.
And thank you all listeners for being with us. Join us again tomorrow as we look at other topical and controversial issues. And of course, to get copies of the program, call our production department at 876-968-9596-7. Download our Love 101 app and stay connected to us, the family station. Thanks to our producer, Kathy Gale, and to our guests. I am Stokely Marshall, handing you back to Love in the Morning with Siobhan Blair. Stay safe.